Welcome back on the AM show. We veer now into the big stories, and we start by contemplating the coup situation in not just West, but Central Africa as well. But coming home, there's been talk from the Chief of Defense Staff that is not going to happen in Ghana. It's not going to be supported by the military. If you take a look at the Daily Graphic today, he says, we won't support coup d'etat. But if you look at the recent happenings in the sub-region and everything in between, does that assurance hold? Does it hold water? Does it have legs to stand on? With all the dynamics that are taking place or happening across the sub-region, with the wind that is blowing. Well, this morning, we contemplate that conversation together with our guests, Justice Tangebe. He is a criminologist and associate professor at Cambridge University in the United Kingdom. We also have Paul Kunle Boateng. He's a security analyst. Both of them join the conversation. We'll have other guests join the conversation as well from the military standpoint, ex-military officers. Well, gentlemen, a very good morning to you. I'm assuming it's morning where both of you are. And thank you for joining us on the AM show.
Hello.
I would like to hear both of you to ensure that both of you are on.
Yeah, hello, good morning.
All right, that's good to hear. I'll start with you, Justice. So from where you sit, maybe I would look into criminal mindedness and how all of this can impact what we're facing. We have the issues of high stock inflation. Inflation is slightly above 40% currently in Ghana. It's the best we've had in 11 months, thereabouts, over 40%. Then you look at the other dynamics you're facing tied to inflation, fuel prices, the cost of food and everything. You look at the fight against galamsey, corruption and everything in between. Yet we're being told there's no opening for coup d'etats in Ghana. Similar rhetoric has been spewed in Nigeria. From where you sit, I'd like to find out, what do you make, first of all, of the happenings in West Africa, especially Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and away from here, Niger? What do you make of those, and what do you think the factors were?
Thank you for having me. I think if you look at those instances of political instability, I think what they communicate to us is that we need to have governance that benefits people,
okay,
that respect who they are, and we have chosen democratic governance for a particular reason. It is that we want governance that creates equal opportunities. We want governance that respects, or the political elite respects the rule of law. They do not disrespect us as citizens, and that there isn't impunity or unaccountability in the way that you have seen in a number of these countries. So I think those are the issues that we need to consider. Of course, military regimes are never really the solution, right? If you look at some of these countries, Ghana, for example, the kind of legal, if you like, brutality that you see, it's not something that a military regime is going to solve. If you look at unequal distribution of wealth, unequal distribution of opportunities, unaccountability, those are not issues that a military regime can resolve. But of course, there are issues that if we do not address, they make us vulnerable to some of these incursions. But I think we also have to say that military incursions are not the only thing that any country should be worried about. I think you can have a situation where there is just a slow decay of institutions, of society, and so forth. Those are also things that we need to be worried about because, again, they would exacerbate whatever problems that we have, and we certainly do not want that to happen.
We certainly don't want that to happen. Of course, the right things must be done to prevent some of those. But Paul, coming to you, when you look at the tail of the tape, the storyline that cuts across the West African sub-region, interestingly, Francophone West Africa, Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and then you can go to Niger as well. What do you make of happenings there?
Thank you for having me. I think, someone can say that because they are Francophone countries, but I don't see it that way because generally, if you look at what is happening in West Africa, especially, you can say one thing, that is poor governance by elected leaders. So if you look at all these countries that have experienced coup d'etats just recently, there are other issues that they always complain about. Just as Justice said, corruption is one, nepotism is one, human rights abuses, and a lot of people don't have jobs, especially youth unemployment rate is going in high. So if you look at all these things, then you see people complaining, calling for military rule. That is where you see military coming in because they are there to, somebody will say, intervene. It's not that military will just stand and wake up one day and take arms and overthrow government. There are other factors that they base on before they take any steps. So, I don't see that coup d'etat is only going to happen in the West Africa, the Francophone countries in the West Africa. I believe if we are not able to, stick to the principles of democracy, to be a term that you cannot control what is going to happen in West Africa. So for me, I don't think it's really going to happen in Francophone West African countries.
Justice, just a quick one. Do you subscribe to that line of thinking? Some have also suggested that, things may not be going well with la francophonie, so to speak, in Africa because France may have had too much of a tight grip, or its politics in West Africa and Central Africa, as a fact, may not be going well. But do you feel there could be a spillover into Anglophone West Africa as well?
Well, I think every country, unless you have built some kind of resilience, unless you have addressed some of the issues that we've just been talking about, issues of corruption, issues of equal opportunities, issues of reassuring people that there are democratic solutions and so forth, any country will be vulnerable. And I think it will be unwise for anyone to say that, no, it can never happen to me. I mean, that's really not a statement you can make. If we were to ask the Burkinabe government the day before the coup, they would have said, of course, it's not going to happen here. If we were to ask the military command in Gabon or in Niger, they would have said, of course, we are not interested. This is never going to happen. The whole point of military interventions is that sometimes they are unpredictable and so forth. So I think we cannot say that it will never happen to country A or country B within, of course, sub-Saharan Africa. But what can reassure us is not just statements from governing elites, including the military. What can assure us is clear, tangible steps to address some of the issues that created this dissatisfaction. And I think that's what we should be worried, for example. I mean, if you look at the Afrobarometer survey, I mean, it's been going on for quite some time now. I've just been looking at the data, and you see that in 2008, only 16% of Ghanaians supported military rule. Today, it's almost a third, right? It's almost 30%. That is really something that should be of concern. What it signals to us is that we are not governing for the benefit of people, and maybe they become desperate, and that's why they see in military interventions a certain solution. But as I've said, it's not a solution. It's not going to address the issues of corruption, impunity, respect for the rights of citizens, and so forth. So it's important that we address those things. We use democratic avenues to address those concerns.
Just let me stay with you briefly. We have stated here categorically that a coup d'etat is not the way to go. It does not bring any, development. But the question then is, why are these countries, with this knowledge, still choosing that route? And if you look at the coup d'etats that have happened in the sub-region and the sort of support that these military expeditionists or the junta have had, it raises quite... I mean, the last one I saw purported to be a video of the ousting of the French ambassador in Niger, for example. People were actually there, ordinary citizens, when he was brought out. Of course, he's a diplomat. He must be handled in a certain way. Brought out, and there were chants of voleur, 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 thief, thief, thief. That was what the people who were there with their phones, if that can be corroborated, were saying. There seems to be that support. And like you rightly said, that latest report, some years ago, you had, just about 16% saying they would support something like this. Now you have a third, about 30% in Ghana saying they would opt for it. Does that point to an erosion of the governance institutions? Does it point to any deterioration of democracy in the sub-region, specifically in Ghana? What's your take?
Well, I think we can, it's safe to say that. And we have to make a distinction between support for democracy per se, and then, of course, satisfaction with the way that it works. And again, here, the Afrobarometer is very helpful in making that distinction. And you will see that support for democracy as a way of organizing or governing ourselves is consistently high. It is satisfaction with democracy that is problematic. It's hovered sometimes around 50%, sometimes less than that. And if you look at those who are very satisfied with democracy, sometimes it's around 20%. But the reason, these Francophone countries would seem to be a peculiar case in this respect, because if you look at France and what it's doing in these former colonies, as it were, that is clearly an unjust situation. You have an external, if you like, an imperialist power that is continuing to exploit these countries. And so it's very easy to see why we would want to just get rid of this bully, as it were. But again, we might want to look at the history, might want to look at the data, especially for the political scientists who've been studying this, to see whether military regimes really help to improve democratic governance in the long term, whether they address the problems that we've just been talking about. I don't really think that they would address those issues. The problem we've had is that we've got a governing elite that doesn't seem to understand the population that it's governing, that seems to hide behind legalese, that issues of ethics appear to be a dirty word in governance, and that they're so narrowly preoccupied with law and so forth. Those are issues that we need to address. And I think the more we work towards resolving those issues, the better. I don't think any democracy or the democracy we have in Ghana or in the sub-region, it's a kind of fantasy democracy, one that presupposes that there will never be any difficulties, there will never be any economic, political, social, whatever challenges. We recognize those things will happen, and that's why we have designed it in a way that we can resolve some of these things that when they do arise, so that we don't move from a problem to a catastrophe. I think the challenge is that we are failing to address those issues. We don't seem to be taking public sentiment seriously. We don't seem to be paying attention to fair distribution of opportunities, fair distribution of wealth. and ensuring that institutions work. No one wants a democracy in which the rule of law is not respected. That's just like a contradiction in terms, right? I don't want a situation where I'm arrested on Wednesday, I'm denied access to even my family, let alone lawyers. I go to court the next day, I'm sentenced and sent to, say, in Sawam, and that's the only place from which I can call my family to say, hey, I'm here in Sawam. That's not a democracy. We need to try to address some of those issues.
Right. Thanks for those thoughts. I'll come to you shortly, Paul. We have a message from Williams Donko who says people are really going through lifetime difficulties, but a coup is not an option. That's what Williams sends through. Let me now engage Captain Budukumson, retired. He joins the conversation. He has been there, done that. He's been in the thick of things, and is here having a conversation with us. Capito, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, sir.
It's really good to have you. It's been a long time. I hope you're well.
I am well, and greetings to your audience.
Great. Let's get down to it. You followed the dynamics in our sub-region and, of course, Central Africa, where there's been a spillover. Now we've got the assurance from the Chief of Defense Staff that the armed forces in Ghana are not going to support any attempt at a coup. That should be enough assurance for us, or should it? What's your take?
Well, I think it was a very good assurance. The assurance itself was very reassuring. And then I find that this sort of open and frank interaction of the CDS and the military hierarchy with the press is very bold and a significant and sign of professionalism and confidence on their part. You see, well, that is my opening comment on that.
So can we basically go to sleep? I mean, recently in Nigeria, we heard similar sentiments shared that, with Nigeria and everything, and of course, President Bola Tinubu recently taking power. I heard someone, I'm not sure whether it was a senator, but some government official saying that it will not happen in Nigeria. I was in Lagos recently, and trust me, what I saw, the real dynamics, just as we have here, versus what the government official was saying, are starkly different. So now that the military has said, the Chief of Defense Staff, we are not interested in this, can we go to sleep and just assume, okay, they've said it, so all is well?
Of course not. Of course not. You see, when you lead men well and engage with them well, train them well, and be with them, in the trenches, and do not be remote. We have remote leadership. That is not the issue with the military and security agencies. You provide them with the necessary tools and equipment, and generally they see that you are doing all in your power, to provide them with the necessary tools and training and keep them busy. How many people will respond well to you?
Right.
I recently read in the papers. The Southern Command is organizing one of the big exercises. You see, exercise this, exercise that. It keeps them trained. And at the moment, for the last few years, you will attest that the security agencies, there has been, within our constraints, a concerted effort to equip them. Have you had that feeling? The police, the military, the armor cars, the ships, and all these things. These things, when you provide them these resources and you train them and you keep them busy and you are upfront with them, normally troops will respond. But to say that do we have to go to sleep? Of course not. We should be constantly working at maintaining or even improving our security posture, because the threat in the sub-region is real. We have this concept of negative proximity. We are in an area where all these things are going on, and it is contagious. So this is not the time to go to sleep. This is rather the time to improve our security posture. What really worries me, actually, is that recently there have been too many, maybe people like myself, so-called security experts, not so well-informed persons in security issues with influence and access to the media and social media making all sorts of assessments and incendiary statements and comments which rather pose a greater threat to our internal security posture. This is my concern. Creating unnecessary tension and making allegations that are not really founded in knowledge and fact. It's a bit worrying.
So you say it's a big worry. Interestingly, I have had people, the Professor Innings, the Professor Vladimir Intridansos, in fact, on a page, a security page where I find myself, someone projected, and there have been projections that more coups would happen even before Niger and Gabon in the Central African region happened. And they have. And some are projecting that more will happen in these regions before end of year. But you touched on governance matters. You said that these countries may not be doing what is expected of them when it comes to governance. That could be a catalyst. Is that correct?
Well, I haven't touched on it this morning, but what you are saying is true. Is true. I mean, governance is a huge factor, and in fact, let me acknowledge the two security couples that you mentioned. I appreciate them. These are not the people I'm talking about. But we have all sorts of people making security assessments and statements. But governance is essential, because if the governance is weak, we have weak institutions, state institutions being disparate, democracy itself not being genuine and all sorts of things. It creates a problem. It creates a problem, and that is my concern. By all means, governance is key here. Governance is key.
Now, if just looking at the advance of the putschists or the coup makers, their onslaught in the sub-region, you would also notice a certain thread. Apart from Niger, where I've seen that, top military officers were involved, you might even speak of, and Gabon in recent times. But when you look at the Mali and the Guinea and the Burkina Faso, usually they are not the generals or very high-ranking officials. The reason I pose that question, the Chief of Defense Staff may be in his quote, and pardon my using this, it's the only expression that comes to mind, ivory tower, but how about those at the bottom? Should we take it for granted that they'll be whipped in line?
Yeah, you see, nobody can actually prescribe a coup. I have been saying this, I don't know since when. Nobody can actually prescribe a coup. The issue is that we actually have to do things, understand the causes of coup, and start addressing these causes of coup. That is the surest way to prevent them. But to say that the CDS is this ugly tower, I don't know. But like I said earlier on, when you are with them in the trenches, when they see that you are trying your level best to provide them the equipment and the tools they need, providing them with the training, and not being remote. I remember during the June 4th days, right? They were arresting officers in all units. My unit, 5 battalion, we decided that we will stay with the troops, and for all those 90-something or 100 days that the AFRCC lasted, we were with them, we slept with them, we trained with them, we spoke with them, we did everything with them. And when they see that genuinely you are helping, they respond. Look at the trainings ongoing, the soldiers are busy. You see, when they are also not busy and they feel neglected, I'll give you an example. Nigeria fighting Boko Haram. You have the chiefs constantly complaining about bad logistics, bad equipment, and all sorts of things. And then bad leadership. Those things can trigger coups. Nobody can actually prescribe coups, but it is leadership that will, and understanding the causes of it. What gives cause to these things? Because if somebody coming to take a coup, he's not going to consult you. He's angry in his own corner, and he is right in his own sense, and will not, very, very often, he has an exaggerated status of right and wrong, and he will do whatever he will do. Nobody can prescribe a coup, but close, good leadership, training, equipment and these things will go along. And then again, Governor, you know, in a lot of these countries where you see these issues happening, you realize that the government, central government presence in a huge rate of those countries was weak. You know, what you call development was not properly distributed all around. Weak governance and all these things. These are things that confuse people. But you see that in our instance here, you see a lot of infrastructure and things going on, spreading development around. These things go a long way to stem some of these complaints.
Right. Hold for me, Captain. Let me bring in Paul as well. There's this message that comes through. Alberto Kante says, why should any government be afraid if they are delivering corrupt and selfish people? That's what he says. We've looked at the dynamic of governance and the domino effect in the sub-region. And now the Chief of Defense Staff says we won't support a coup. But based on the other dynamics we've considered, should we just take that word for it? Or would we be sort of living in a fool's paradise if we did so?
So, good for that one.
Hello, Paul. If you could speak up for me, I'd be grateful.
Can you hear me now?
It's better.
Okay. I will say assurances are good. And looking at where he sits, he cannot say anything different. But one thing you should know also is that he is not a hypnotizer who can go to everybody's mind, especially the soldiers, to know that no one is interested in, staging coup d'etat. And there are so many factors that when you get to that point, the military will have no option than to intervene because they have the wherewithal to do so. I've heard so many things, and a lot of people also are saying you should go and sleep. But I disagree with anyone who will say that we should go and sleep, because we cannot just take the assurances from the military and go to bed. If I heard Mr. Coulson right, he said if some of the logistics are provided to the military, some of the things that maybe you can say that can prevent coup d'etat. Well, one thing that we have, because if you go through the sort of training, they are to protect the territorial integrity from external aggression. That is one. They also have to maintain internal security. Assuming something is happening, like it happened in Sudan, and you think that the military will stay in balance because they have given us assurance, that will not happen, because one, they have to step in to make sure that things are done right. One thing that people are trying to do, especially when it gets to elections, you often see the leaders, their intention is to securitize the elections, electoral process especially. And when you do that, you take using an election as an existential threat and trying to find every means available to win an election. And you expect the people, especially the opposing side, to be calm and just going to bed. These are some of the things that we have to talk about. It's not about giving out a short assurance, or maybe the military high command has been giving some of the logistics that they are looking for. You get my point? There are so many things that goes on before military will step in. And I've just given you one, elections in particular. Apart from other economic and bad governance, these are some of the things that we have to take a very critical look at the whole thing. So I don't agree with anybody who will come to tell us that because of the assurances we should go and sleep. No, I don't agree. And this is not the first time. Maybe I've just said Jackson. He's saying that it's now 30%. 2021, when we conducted our survey, 20%
Which survey was this? Which survey was this?
No, 2021 was conducted by Axis. I think I've said this so many times. In fact, I'm the first person predicted that coup is going to happen in Africa. That was 2020. And I've said it over and over and over again. So we conducted survey here, and 20% were calling for coup d'etat. And sometimes people don't, agree with some of us when you say certain things. But it's good that you say it, because when you say it, it gives the idea to the leadership, those in governance, to take measures. But if you keep quiet and thinking that, okay, if you say these people are going to talk about it, they are going to start you and you keep quiet, you might not know. But when you say it and people start talking about, even if the leaders are doing something bad that they think that is going to cause them to lose power or maybe invite the military to intervene, they will do some of the
okay,
things,
so
change their way.
Right, thank you. That's an important point you make. Coming to you, Justice, feeding off or segueing from what he said, you would realize that the Chief of Defense Staff then says, quote, "It's mostly the press who put the fear of military coups in the people. But I want to assure you that we have the interest of the nation at heart." Mind you, he was engaging the presidency, among others, of the GJA. I found that interesting. I don't know whether they would prefer that we just keep mum, shush, pretend nothing is there, till maybe disaster strikes, or whether this is the right thing to do, responsibly, to have conversations about the issue. What's your take?
Well, my understanding of the role of journalists is that they are supposed to hold power to account. They are supposed to ensure that there is respect for the rule of law, that those who have power use that power in a way that benefits especially the most vulnerable in society. And so I think they're only, in a sense, reporting what is happening. And we cannot have a democracy in which the press is muzzled, as it were. I think maybe one thing we also need to say is that the whole point of democracy is not to prevent, if you like, a coup d'etat. I mean, but we want a democracy so that, again, we can organize ourselves, or at least we think that's the best way that we can organize ourselves in a way that respect who we really are, people who have a sense of dignity, people who want to be treated equally before the law, people who want answers to their questions, especially the way that their resources are used, and that these resources are used to benefit the majority of the people, and so forth. This is the point of, I think, democratic governance. And if things are not happening, or at least the public have concerns about these sort of issues, our interest should be to find, again, within that democratic space, ways that we can improve. And I think that should be where our attention is. How can we ensure that there is greater accountability? How can we ensure that even the limited resources that we have, they are distributed in a way that benefits most people? How can we ensure that those who abuse their power, they are held to account? Those are the sort of things that we need to do. If we rather spend time undermining institutions, creating a sense of helplessness and powerlessness, that really doesn't, even if we imagine a world in which there's no military. Imagine a world where there is no military, right? There is no risk of any coup. Does that mean that we can allow governance to decay? Does that mean that we can allow unequal distribution of resources? Does that mean that we can allow impunity to prevail? No. So those are really the issues that we need to try to address, and not be so, if you like, preoccupied with military coups per se, as if the whole point of democratic governance is how can we prevent a military coup. I think that's a really negative.
It's just an aspect of the conversation, one aspect of the conversation. But I guess it all boils down to this comment by Senior Gino, who's watching live. He says, fairness is the only option to stop this in Africa. I've heard of instances, like in Nigeria, where some say, you know what, there's the national cake, and we're producing oil and all of these resources for the nation. But practically nothing is going on here by way of development. You come to Ghana and there are similar discussions. There's the issue of galamsey and how we're dealing with it. There's the issue of corruption and everything else tied to governance. Now, I put this to you. Justice. You look at Senegal, maybe once considered one of those foremost bastions of democracy, and what is happening there. You look at Gabon, and the ousted president, Ali Bongo, now put out a video, oh, make some noise. Friends, make some noise. And some of us have asked, what noise? The noise of the people when they complain about the economy, the noise of the people when they complain about corruption and unfairness, the noise of the people when they complain about what was happening with the telcos and all of that. No one listened. Then the putsch happens. Look at the money that was found in individuals' homes. Okay? So, are our governments not focusing, like you rightly said, too much on regime security? Let's securitize the regime and all of that, rather than on human security, which would mean working on the economy, working on the cost of living, working on the basic things that will make people happy and prevent them from, engaging in such activities.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a point that we've been making, that at the heart of this is fairness, right? Fair distribution of resources, fair distribution of opportunities, a fair criminal justice process, a fair electoral process, accountability, and so forth. I think these are the issues, and we need to try to address them. I think it's instructive that the former president of Gabon could only use the word noise, because to him, probably what the citizens were talking about when he was in power was noise. And so he expects similar things. Rather than pointing to specific things that he had done, he could have said, look, when I was in power, I created opportunities. It didn't matter whether you belonged to my family or not. It didn't matter whether you were a friend. The opportunities were equally distributed to everyone. Look at the employment rates that have improved. Look at the crime and security that has improved, and so forth. He wasn't pointing to those things. And I think that's instructive in that sense. And that's the point that we've been making, that democracy needs to work for the people. That's the really fundamental issue. It needs to work for the people. We cannot allow it to be hijacked by political and economic elites who are only concerned about their interests and so forth. And I think the point has been made time and time again that in Ghana and in other countries within the sub-region, resources are not being used in the way that improve the living conditions of citizens. And I think that needs to be addressed.
That needs to be addressed.
Really what we need to work on to improve or consolidate our democracy.
Hold for me. Let me bring in Captain Budukumsen, retired. Captain, you have already acknowledged that some of the ingredients that we've seen in other countries that have gone the way of coup d'etats are also present here. That, hoping I'm not misquoting you. If I am, please address that. But given your experience, what should the nation be doing to avoid any attempts at a coup? What should we be doing now? You don't wait for disaster to strike. What should we be doing?
Thank you for that. I would say that, look, shouldn't be gotten wrong. Providing the military with the necessary equipment and good leadership is just one aspect of security in the country. Like the speaker said, we should not make democracy about regime security. No, it's one aspect. The main aspect of peace and stability in these regions is good governance, deepening good governance. Because if there is unfair distribution of development, if a sitting president will try to change the constitution to extend his tenure in office, if the development is not fairly shared, and bad governance results in stresses to the people, These things actually undermine security in the state, not just the military. Good governance in all aspects. Independence of the judiciary is key. Freedom of expression is key. Corruption is tackled openly. Are key. But what we should be doing different is exactly what are the causes of these things that are happening. Good governance, as I said, we have to deepen democracy. And this acrimonious campaigning and electioneering thing has to be tamped down, And then this thing about winner takes all syndrome is also inimical to peace. We have to improve political tolerance of, let's say, the opposition. Judiciary has to be strengthened. State institutions have to be strengthened. And these are the things I think we should be doing differently to prevent, like I said, we have to look at the causes, things that give rise to these things, because it's the political and social causes, stresses in the system that actually trigger some of these coups, because the militaries are the only organized force that actually can force change. The ordinary person on the street is fighting force change. These are some of the things I would say.
All right. Before, as we gear up to wrap the conversation, I will also look at what other measures we can bring to bear to forestall a coup. But from where you sit, Captain, how will you rate the security of the country from where you sit currently? If you had, on a scale of 1 to 10, if you had to rate security situation in Ghana, where would you peg it?
Well, considering the negative proximity situation we have to all these disturbances around and the possibility of contagion, I would rate our security about, say, 7.
Our security is at 7.
Yeah, 6, 7. 6, 7. But anything can happen. That's why I say we can't just go to sleep and say that can we go to sleep because the CBS is no. We can't go to sleep. There's a lot of stress in the system, a lot of economic hardship in the system. The people need development and all these things. And from the political, social side, we have to improve, go on constant improvement, and let the people also see what is happening, transparency in government. These are the things that will actually make it safer. We can improve the security rating of the country. I would say around 6, because the situation is not that too good. Okay, so did you just end by saying around 6? Yes, I'll say around 6.
Okay, so your score is 6 out of 10 in terms of security in Ghana. For you, Paul, to cap off the conversation, where would you rate us when it comes to security currently in Ghana on a scale of 1 to 10 on that very level? What would be your rating?
To give specific figure, but what I know for sure is that when it comes to security in West Africa, Ghana is number 1. No other country can compete with us in that score. But to rate them will be something that, because you can even rate them 10. It doesn't matter. Someone can take or maybe do something that may not even expect it. But I would not like to rate them in that. But
what would you prefer as the solutions moving forward? What briefly should we be looking at to forestall any such happenings?
I think fairness. If we're able to apply democratic principles, and if that happens and people feel comfortable, people feel happy with the system, if any military man take guns, the citizens will send that person, they will chase him away. It's happening in La Côte d'Ivoire. When General Gay came for the second time, he wanted to stay on power. The citizens of La Côte d'Ivoire chased General Gay out. It's happening in Burkina Faso. It was when Blaise Compaoré wanted to stay on power, the citizens of Burkina Faso chased him out. So if the leaders, elected leaders, practice good governance, if any military come to state coup d'etat, the citizens of the country will chase them away. Does that
mean, like we've seen across West Africa, just briefly, in some countries, even Niger, Burkina Faso, with people celebrating. Does that mean that maybe they got it wrong? And that is why some people, of course, not all people, but some people, quite a number of people were, in a celebratory mood?
Yes, because before any military leader or military person take a gun to stage a coup, the citizens, they have, heard something, and they have also understand the situation on the ground. Because when people start talking, even though they are embarrassed, they hear, they also feel what is going on. And we have to protect the constitution. And as a leader, elected leader, if you are not practicing democracy, good governance, and adopt what I term democratic coup d'etat, you don't expect military to stay at Barra. They also come with military coup d'etat. That is what is going on. So if you're able to stick to the principles of democracy, and we cannot be perfect, that one, we cannot be perfect. But if people, the citizens are happy with what you are doing, they will even protect you.
Okay.
No one will dare take a gun or come to do sort of things.
Okay. Let me thank you for that final take. Let me bring in Justice Tankebe. What would be your rank for Ghana from where you sit as far as security is concerned? And what solutions would you proffer to cap off the conversation?
I think it's really difficult. I don't really know enough of the various variables to be able to give a rating per se. But I think the question we need to ask ourselves, this recent wave of coups, I think they started around 2020, and we've had about 7 or so of them. We need to ask ourselves, what have we done in Ghana since at least 2020 in terms of governance? Has governance improved? Has the rule of law specifically improved? Has corruption, have we done enough to be able to tackle corruption? Have we done enough to create equal opportunities? Have we done enough in all these other areas and so forth? Or at least are we signaling to the population our commitment to improving on these in these areas? And I think a fair judgment must be that, in fact, things appear to be deteriorating over the last how many years. And I think that should be our worry. Again, our worry not because we want to prevent a coup, our worry because it would mean more people are being pushed down the poverty line. It means people's rights are being abused. It means people are going sometimes without food and so forth. Those are the issues that we really need to be concerned about. And I think in highlighting the issues that we have been discussing, we are as the potential correlates of this instability and so forth. We are invariably saying that those are the issues that need to be addressed. Okay. Yes, any efforts now will not yield results overnight, but at least they can create a certain confidence, a certain assurance. That's the assurance that we need. It's not the assurance from the military high command. That really, to me, hasn't got much of a significance to it. The assurance that we need is the one that signals that, look, we are allowing state institutions to operate. The state institutions themselves recognize their responsibility to citizens, and they are working towards carrying out that responsibility. Those are the things that I think we need, and we really need to work on these issues as urgently as we can.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for having joined the conversation. We're grateful to you. Justice Tankebe, you just heard him speak. He is a criminologist and associate professor at Cambridge University. Also joining the conversation, Paul Kunle Boateng. He's a security analyst. And we also had someone who's been in the military and also analyzes security-related matters, Captain Budukumsin, retired. Thank you once more, gentlemen.